Welcome all um, yeah, to this gathering of practice. We are on. I'm just hearing a little. You hearing something over there? Yeah. Yeah. Here we are, like already on our fourth day. Maybe some of you are thinking, finally, on our fourth day, dragged through to the fourth day. But also it's just a flash of summer lightning. Here we are, just now, only now. How peaceful to let everything else fall away. We gather like this and we do this practice. And actually the subject I want to address this morning is all about just doing this practice. And we do it, and really what's happening, I know it's talking about the sweat lodge effect and the hot Epsom salt foot bath effect of drawing out what needs to be drawn out so it can be released. Fine. But in another analogy, really, it's just things falling away. It's just, it's more like the first segment of the rocket just drops off. I mean, and we're on, lots of travel analogies I've been bringing. The ship sailing. You don't really want the ship falling apart. That'll work as an analogy. The train, the choo-choo train, and that's not so good. You don't really want wheels falling off and brakes falling off. But whatever it is, the right analogy is this very practice. It's its own analogy. We're sitting like this, and somehow more and more just falls away. And it just gets simpler. Our very existence, our very existing, our being alive, really, you could say, our being just gets simpler. Just this. This elaborate stuff, flying in, stopping work for these days, gathering here, gathering on Zoom, clearing the diary, and just to be here, investing time, investing effort, thousands of years of teachings and practices and guidance and tools and methods and koans, hundreds of koans and sutras, teachers, generations of teachers, lineages of teachers, just for this. Just exactly for this. And you're all doing it. This is what's going on here in our gathering, both Santa Fe based and around the world, is 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 actually, that's what matters. whatever teachings are offered are totally superfluous. They're just extra. You know, the real thing is being still together, practicing together. Joe, I just want to check. Is everything okay sound-wise? There was just a message that came up. It's good? Okay. So, um, here's what I want to talk about. It's this central document of Zen style Buddhism, of what they call Mahayana Buddhism or Great Vehicle Buddhism, which kind of was a slight recalibration of Buddhism that happened about 2,000 years ago and has been one of the dominant streams of Buddhism. There are multiple streams. It's all the same water. It's all the same river. So we don't want to get too hung up on, is it this kind, is it that kind? No, don't worry about that. But in this creative, generative process of Buddhism flowing down the generations, as a practice, not as ideas and stuff, just a practice, there was this document that came to have a very important position for a lot of people called the Heart Sutra. Okay, and its actual full title is the Prajnaparamitra Heart Sutra. So here's what I want to do. That's the title. 4 words. Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. So really I just want to talk about those 4 words, but I need to just bring in the first line as well. Okay, the first line goes like this. And I will be explaining it, so don't worry too much about what sounds technical. Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva, practicing deep prajna paramita, clearly saw that all 5 skandhas are empty, thus transforming all suffering and distress. Okay, so the title and then first line. Now, yesterday, we heard beautifully from Valerie about one of the kind of, I would call it, origin stories of this practice, which is Buddha, the Buddha, Shakyamuni, sitting under the tree for 6 straight days and nights, having resolved not to get up until finally he'd resolved the little core nugget of distress, of unease, of dis-ease, of discomfort, of dukkha, or suffering at the heart of being him that was there. He didn't want to get up. Well, he resolved, I will not get up until this is somehow resolved. And in that version, or in that origin story, he sits there 6 days, 6 nights, and on the 6th, or is it the 7th, I don't know, 6th, I guess, morning, looks up in the dawn sky, sees Venus, the planet, twinkling, and realizes that he and the star are one, that basically jumps from the contracted sense of self. This is maybe, a parsing out of it. From the contracted sense of self, of being the owner of this body, the agent, possessor, experiencer within this body, somehow that contracted sense of self, and it is contracted, but we don't know that it is until we've seen it outside it, kind of thing. It just dropped away, and the true, or the bigger, the full reality of who he was just apparent, because basically that contracted sense of the self is actually the only thing obscuring the bigger reality of who we each and all are. It's so simple. So obviously, he sees, oh, I am the star. We're just one. We're just part of one thing. Except it's not a thing, but it doesn't have a name. It doesn't fit into our naming view, the view that can do names, can identify what lots of separate things are. This view, this bigger view, cannot do that. In a sense, it's not even a view. Kind of, you could pretend it is. It makes it easier to think about. Sort of view. He jumps. The smaller view falls away. The bigger view just naturally shows itself. It's all very natural. You see, he didn't need teachers and koans and sutras. He just needed a star and a tree and his human body, human heart, human mind. That's actually all we need. Oh, why all this bother, Well, because, actually at the same time, it's there is the mercy that these traditions have dedicated themselves to helping us find this. Because, we might stumble into it. People do stumble into the bigger view. And it may be, some of them, Eckhart Tolle, sleeping on a bench in London. He suddenly just sort of got it. I think he then went through some very difficult months of trying to figure out how to sort of live with it. Even now, I sometimes find, I've learned a lot from him, so I'm not going to diss him at all. I'm really grateful people like him exist. But there's some teachings of his that I find a little bit weird, But anyway, needless to put that aside, doesn't matter. Great, he just did it. I think a lot of people, well, I don't know, some number of people, just it happens, but they don't really find the way through, to get free. That first experience of this, in Buddha's case, he's the sort of archetypal primordial case, because for him it was just a one-shot deal. But I think that's, in my experience, that's quite rare. I don't really know, actually. I think even Ramana Maharshi, that famous sage of India, the 20th century, such a famous figure of world spirituality, who was sort of celebrated around the world. He, I think he was about 16 when he had a kind of massive awakening experience. But he then sort of crawled into a kind of cellar for 9 months and something barely alive. And it was very, very difficult. And then eventually he crawled out to a teacher to get some help, because it's actually, apparently it is rather difficult to even just sort of get that experience, but then people talk about integrating it. I don't really think that's a very good word, actually, because I think it's more like, it can happen, and then there's sort of a passageway beyond it. It's like there's actually more to do. It turns out that initial experience is actually more like a gate or a portal to more, and even though in some sense it isn't, because you're sort of you've seen it all in some sense, but actually how do you get it in here really thoroughly? How do you really, it's not exactly integrating, it's just going a bit further until you're through. It's like coming through a tunnel, and it can happen. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that too much, because many of us are like, well, God, I'm not worried about beyond it. Let me just have a first taste of it. And actually, I don't even want to worry about that. I just want to be here. I don't want to have some goal of having some experience. I'm having an experience right now, for Christ's sake. Don't tell me to have some other experience. This is enough. And actually, that's the right way. That's the right and only way to do this practice. Forget anything else. It's absolute rubbish. There is nothing else. Just sitting here is all we're doing. So we have to use these stories of Shakyamuni Buddha yesterday. Today, I'm going to talk about this other one, Avalokiteshvara, also doing same thing, awakening. But actually, we've got to use these stories very, very cautiously, advisedly, which is basically let it wash through and absolutely forget about it. Just in one ear, out the other. Okay, gone. Stories are rubbish. Okay, basically, if you dwell on them at all, it's only misleading you. Now, there can be wisdom in weird stories we get tangled up in. They may do something for us that's helpful, maybe, but it doesn't matter. You still don't need them. You don't need them. Insofar as you need anything, it's just exactly what we're doing. Sitting quietly together, slowing down, learning to pay maybe only a little bit more, but a little bit more attention to what's happening now, and now, and now. So when it's mealtime, a little bit of, I like mealtime. Notice that. Getting up, slow, nice little ceremony. Food on the altar, bell, walking, standing, sitting, getting food, bowl, plate, fork, spoon, insert, lift, insert, close, put down, chew. Chew, chew, chew. Swallow. Repeat. Just noticing. Now, okay. Prajnaparamitra, Heart Sutra. Like the star story, is also a story, this little document, about somebody going from sort of contracted view to full view. That's what the first line says. This person called Avalokiteshvara, who was one of the students of Shakyamuni Buddha, clearly saw was doing deep Prajnaparamitra, was practicing deeply. I've got to tell you what Prajnaparamitra is in a second, but they were doing it. And because they were doing it, they clearly saw that all 5 skandhas, that means, I don't want to go into it now, we have a whole week on the skandhas, not going to there now, but it just means all experience. The totality of your experience right now was empty. They saw that all the levels and elements of experience are empty. And thus suffering was ended. So here it is. Prajnaparamita. This is it. Practicing Prajnaparamita. This very quiet. This very, call it sort of gathered focus. This clear attention. This very awareness right now. This is the practicing of Prajnaparamitra. So what does it actually mean? Well, a paramita is a word that means two possible things. One is a perfection, which we might also say call a virtue. It's a bit easier to get your head around it. I mean, it's like a very fine human quality, let's say, a very fine human quality and kind of way of being. And in one formulation, there's 6 of them. And they are: generosity is the first. The second one is generosity, giving. First one, foundational, giving. Second one, restraint. Shila means restraint, acting harmlessly. So first is just giving, and the second is giving safety. I will not be contributing to harm and danger. My gift is to, the best I can, offer safety to the world, to other beings. That's the second one. Restraint. I won't kill. I won't steal. I won't lie. I won't misuse sexuality. I won't use intoxicants, because I want a clear mind, and also because intoxicants make it more likely we'll do the first 4. If you see what I mean. And that's true. That's a matter of record that commonly folks I used to see in jail when I was teaching meditation, often the crime had been committed under the influence. The third one is patience. I sometimes feel if I could just really consistently get patience, my practice would be done. Just being patient, giving everything time, giving yourself time. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Why don't we have? It's called kshanti, actually, patience. And so we could also have, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva practicing deep kshanti paramita. I'd be perfectly happy with that, forever. We just find the deep stillness of patience here, now. And then the fourth one is vidya, which means, variously translated, means sort of constancy, not giving up, not letting up, determination. I don't know, just staying the course, just staying with it. It sort of goes nicely with patience, actually. 2 faces of one coin, really. Patience and resolve, right? I just stay with it. And then the fifth one is I think it's samadhi. Or is it dhyana? I think it's dhyana or jhana, which is Zen. The word Zen is actually the Pali word jhana, the Sanskrit word dhyana, Zen, absorbed sitting, becoming deeply absorbed in our sitting. Sort of, we sit. Experience is arising. Sight, sound, body sensation. As we're sitting, occasionally a little waft of incense. It's us sitting. Sight, sound, body sensations, including breath, of course, body sensation. These things arise, keep arising. We become more and more finely attuned to them, more and more aware of tiny sounds we wouldn't normally hear. It's rather as if we were used to going for a walk down a track. Walking down the track every day, daydreaming a bit, thinking things through a bit, nice constitutional, half an hour walk, whatever, good old pace, and all of a sudden, no, we're going to do it at half pace. No, we're going to do it quarter pace. We're going to do it at 1/8 pace. And we start to see every little pebble shining, glinting, each little ripple in the dried mud of a puddle, each little stalk of grass. It's a bit like that with a soundscape. When we slow down, we start hearing more and more finely. And the more finely we hear, and the more sort of appreciatively we just see and sense body sensations, the more all of that experience sort of gradually kind of draws us into it. We get absorbed in it. We become more like there isn't such a strong, clear line between me and what I'm experiencing. We're getting more absorbed in our experience. Okay, and then that's the fifth one. Then the sixth one, prajna, wisdom, wisdom, wisdom. What wisdom? Well, it seems to mean exactly that, not the contracted view, when that drops away and it's all open. Big view, open, boundless, clear. And it's really, in the end, it's openness and boundlessness. Boundlessness is sort of infinite, actually. And the reason it's infinite is because it's what is said in the first line of the sutra, empty. This practitioner, student, Avalokiteshvara, sees that all experience is empty, 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 clear, absolutely clear. Therefore, endless, empty, infinite. So that's prajna, is that. So the paramita is actually I didn't yet say what it is, did I? I said there's a perfection or a virtue. That's one meaning of it. The other meaning that's maybe more useful for us here is that it can mean a means of crossing over. A means of crossing over. crossing what? Well, probably the river of suffering. There's teachings on it that reference this, crossing to the other shore, getting to the far shore. Now, just in case we start thinking, once again, that this is not enough, that this here is not enough, but there's something else to get to. Just in case we should start thinking that with words like paramita as a means of crossing over, just in case. We're also told that this is deep in the Zen tradition. When you get to the other shore, that's when you realize there never was another shore. So the other shore is here also, this. It's just this. So the whole journey is just this. So, Prajnaparamitra is exactly what we're doing. Just this. We can call it just this practice. Yeah. Okay. So that's I think that's about it for today. Just the title. Now, actually, I want to give you another little perspective, just to have in your back pocket, to understand what we're doing. I think it's quite possibly helpful. Many of you will know the famous developmental psychologist Piaget, who was especially child development was his thing. He was a Swiss psychologist. I think he was born in the late 19th century, died maybe right at the end of the 19th century, died in about 1980 or something like that. But he's a very influential psychologist. And he studied, development of humans through childhood and on. And he figured out there were two main sort of processes by which we learn, which he called assimilation and accommodation. And assimilation is when he said we would develop what he called a schema, like a sort of frame of understanding things. And assimilation is when we just get new information into that frame. And that's what we do a lot of as we're growing and through life. But the other kind of learning he called accommodation, which maybe seems like a slightly weird word, but it means when new information comes in for which the existing frame can't accommodate, then the frame has to break. And we get a new frame, a new schema. And then we can carry on assimilating again until, oops, something doesn't fit. We either reject it, or if we're willing, we break the frame and have a new frame. So it's not a bad analogy for exactly this process of Prajnaparamita, right? We've got an existing frame, and I'm hearing all this stuff, and maybe this is the value of teaching: is hearing stuff. Somehow there's more. I don't know. No, there isn't more. It's just here. It's just here. They're all confusing. I don't know what they're talking about. It's here. It's not here. Is it the other shore? Is it this shore? What's a shore anyway? I'm just sitting here. I'm just trying to do this retreat. Can't you just stop making it so confusing? And why add all this nonsense? What's wrong with me just sitting here following my breath, for Christ's sake? Isn't that enough? Excuse my language. Why isn't that enough? Of course it is enough. Of course it is. But still, maybe there's some value in hearing all this weird stuff, because it might be knocking on the frame a little bit, the frame of me in here, world out there. So it can break that massive schema, that massive frame of things. It can just shatter. And I suspect that the real value of this practice, and when we've really gone through that tunnel I was talking about, is when no more frame is forming. Not when we've got finally we've got the right frame. We just haven't got a frame. We haven't got a schema anymore. This is the virtue, I wish it should be one of them actually, but it isn't, of not knowing. Maybe that's what the wisdom really is. I don't know anything anymore. The wisdom is finally, I've forgotten everything I ever knew, which is exactly what one Zen master said on his awakening. Everything I ever knew has gone. Everything I ever knew is forgotten. Wow. Finally, I'm alive. Finally, I'm alive. Finally, I'm born. It is like a kind of, can be like a kind of being born again in a certain sense, you know. It really can, like, but not just once, you know. So like, I've done that now. I know what being reborn is. Boom, I got it. You know, no. This is not like that. It's always new. It's always unknown. No frame, no understanding. It's so easy to get understanding together. Lots of people do it in spiritual practice, but actually, I think the real pushing of spiritual practice is against any understanding, any frame. Because what's then possible? Well, first of all, we're closer to how things really are in this ever-evolving cosmos that we don't understand. You know, we're closer to the reality of that. But also, what happens is that, you know, we start to live from here, the heart, because the head's not ruling it. Just letting the heart see. This is why it's called Heart Sutra. Okay. Actually, there are other reasons, but you know, let's call this the main reason. It's called the Heart Sutra. It's about the heart, how the heart sees, when it's not messed up by the head. You know, we're kind of slightly lobotomized. You know, benevolently. You know, and then the heart wakes up. Oh, and then life is different. Different. Heart, heart, heart. Wisdom of the heart wakes up. Okay, so let's see. Next time, I don't know, weather permitting or all things permitting, we'll go to the a bit more on the first line.